Hey guys, quick promo here for OptimizeFR.com, OptimizeFirstResponder.com. Check them out now. Use code J15 for your 15% discount on your first order or off of creatine, multivitamins, or electrolytes. Check them out now. Code J15, OptimizeFR.com. Thanks, guys. My second promo, RBAminos.com. That's RBAminos.com. Same code J15 right here for your 15% off your first purchase of any peptide from RB Aminos. Go check them out. They are the number one supplier in quality peptides. Go. You won't be disappointed. Welcome to the NOFC podcast, everyone. My name is Jay. Episode 44, How to Prepare for What's Next, with my guest, Rich Black, who is a retired NYSP captain with over 20 years experience and is now in his afterlife enjoying a really cool job in the AI world, but also kind of in law enforcement. So before we get too crazy into anything in particular, Rich, thank you very much for being on. I appreciate your time and your information that you're going to provide everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Jay.
Absolutely. All right. So let's get this party started with a little, we'll do some chronological order and we'll dig into your life. First of all, where are you from and where did you grow up?
I am from Rochester, New York. I grew up in a suburb called Irondequoit, which is on the Lake Ontario shoreline north of the city.
Okay. Siblings? You have any siblings?
I do. I have a sister, and she was 2 years younger than me. Unfortunately, we just lost her to cancer at 49 this spring. But we were very close, and only 2 years and 1 day apart growing up.
Oh my goodness. I'm deeply sorry for that. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry for your loss. So growing up, were you involved in any sports? Did you have law enforcement as a particular goal, as what you wanted to do as a career? And also, let's talk about your parents for a little bit. It sounds as if from our previous conversation and what you sent me, there's no prior law enforcement in your family.
No. I grew up. I grew up in a family, typical Rochester family. My dad worked at Kodak. He was in the black and white paper division. He put the emulsion on the paper for 28 years. My mom was a nurse, and we grew up, they both worked shift work. We, kind of that rotating parent schedule that a lot of people that I grew up with had. But yeah, I grew up in a nice neighborhood, like I said, in Irondequoit, New York. Typical Gen X upbringing. I don't think our parents knew where we were most of the time. We had these geographical boundaries that don't go past this street or this hill and be home when it gets dark. But a lot of fun, really different age compared to what my kids have. No phones. You had to go down the street and knock on someone's door and ask if they could come out and play. We played outside, right?
Yeah.
I remember our mom kicking us out in the morning, go outside and don't come back till lunchtime. And, it was a great place to grow up, and great group of kids that I grew up with up there.
That's awesome. So as you progress through school, now your parents obviously no law enforcement background, but does that ever become a thing to you? And then also, what do you do after high school for college, if any, and what kind of career path do you take?
Growing up, I always went to Catholic schools. My family was a very deeply Catholic family. So I grew up in that Catholic tradition, Catholic grade school. In 8th grade, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school here in Rochester called McQuaid. And, I kind of foundered, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know any cops. That was never on my radar growing up. But I always thought my goal when I was growing up was to go in the Navy or to do something maritime related. And my father had been in the Navy and hated it. And they were putting me through this college prep school. So when I would say I want to join the Navy or do something like that, they're absolutely not. You're going to college. We're paying for this high school. You're going to go to college. So um, I didn't do well enough in school to get into the Naval Academy or the Coast Guard Academy like I'd hoped to. So I ended up right out of high school going to a college called Gettysburg College, which is down in it's Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's right on the battlefield. There's still buildings on that campus that have bullet holes from the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
The administrative building was a Civil War hospital, but Gettysburg is really where I guess I started to cement what I wanted to do in life. I kind of fell into the college newspaper when I was there and started writing for that with the encouragement of a teacher who's still a mentor. It's been 35 years. He's still a mentor. I just saw him a couple months ago, but he really pushed me into writing and into journalism. And I became a member of the student newspaper there. And, it was fun. It was a chance to really dig into campus life and to talk about things that you want to talk about. We had some big stories when I was there. We had a student whose girlfriend went to the University of Delaware, and she was pregnant. And when she had the baby, they actually ended up they killed it. They wrapped the baby in a blanket and put it in a dumpster outside the dormitory. And we got that story because the student was a student at Gettysburg. We had this huge story that the national media started showing up on campus for, asking for our input and our guidance. So,
Wow.
and then some other things that happened, fraternity related. But I found it fascinating to be at the center of everything as a journalist and to really just go out. And I guess you could say it's ADD. Like, I love going out, probably the same reason I love the troopers. Like, no 2 days were the same. You would go out, you'd meet new people, you talk to people, really learn something new every day. So for me, it was exciting. And that was my first taste of it, was at Gettysburg College.
So then as you progress through college, and obviously you come to the point where you're going to graduate, do you get a job in that same field? And if so, where is that and what are you doing?
I had the good fortune to, when I was at Gettysburg, I went and did a semester in Washington, D.C., and I actually was an intern for the Cox Newspaper's Washington Bureau. So I wrote for the Austin American-Statesman, which was the newspaper of the capital of Texas. And I got to do a lot of really cool stories. I had a congressional press pass. I could go up into Capitol Hill. I had access to go and attend press briefings, obviously covering the Texas delegation. But also worked at a paper down there called Roll Call, which was the newspaper of Capitol Hill. So at that point, I was about halfway through my college career, and I realized that I wanted to do that full time. So I decided I was going to transfer, and I transferred from Gettysburg College to Cornell University in Ithaca. And in Cornell, I actually got to work for the Ithaca newspaper, the Ithaca Journal, it was called at the time, and further developed my skills as a journalist, and then ended up in a journalism fellowship in Arizona at the Arizona Republic. And that led to a job on Wall Street with Dow Jones Newswires, where I became a financial news editor. So that was my progression. It really went from the Gettysburg College newspaper to a couple really cool internships in Washington, D.C., to a journalism fellowship that landed me a full-time job as a journalist.
So at some point that obviously changes, but being in this type of career path, what's the natural trajectory of that career path? Is there step up from one point to another where you could either make more money or you could be known as a better, like, how does that, if you know, obviously you probably should, but if you can walk us through how that trajectory works, because this is the first I'm ever talking to anybody that had anything to do with that. So I find it a little fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, it was really working yourself up from small markets to bigger markets. So at at roll call, my mentor was a gentleman named Ed Henry. Ed was on Fox News. He was one of their anchors for a long time. He got in trouble, some kind of misconduct, and ended up getting terminated. But the people I worked with in those roles were all on the fast track to go up into journalism. So Jim Van de High, I believe his name was, I worked with him at roll call. He became one of the founding members of Politico, which is a major website, political website. So another woman became the editor of the Washington Post. So it was really, if you were in the journalism in Washington, it was working yourself up into those bigger Washington media sources. Or you could go like and do a path where you went out and worked in like here, like Rochester would be an entry level market, and then move yourself up into bigger markets. I saw a lot of people. I was kind of at the tail end of print journalism, where a lot of the people I worked with ended up on TV and doing other things on the internet. But yeah, it was, for me, getting to Dow Jones was like, that was the greatest of both worlds, because you were working directly within the financial sector. So when I was there, for example, I worked on the commodities desk for a while, and that was covering crude oil, like OPEC, and all the major decisions that the Middle East would make. And we would literally push a button and publish a headline. It was electronic. It'd go out to monitors on traders' desk. It would go out on the big boards at the exchanges, but you could watch the market move. Like, you could hit the button with the headline saying OPEC's going to cut supply, and you could watch the oil market go up. So it was fascinating. It was really just being right at the pulse of it, like right there when it was happening, and it was exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's rather obvious. At some point, this either had to have lost its zest, or you had to look and want something different. So explain to the viewers, like, what that pivotal moment was. Did you just want more out of your life? How did the troopers come along, and what does that look like for you to get into them?
Well, when I was growing up, I grew up with two guys named Dan and Dave Flanagan. A lot of your viewers will know these guys. They're twin brothers. They started down in Troop F, I think one in Ellenville, one in Liberty, around 2000. We grew up together. Like, I've known those guys since we were in kindergarten. There's a picture behind me of us three outside the academy at my graduation. We almost all died together in a car accident when we were 19 years old, when I fell asleep and ran off the road one day. But we had this trajectory, and I remained close with those guys when I went into journalism. So I watched Dan go through the academy, went up to Ellenville and visited him when he was on the road, did a ride along with him one time just to see what the job was like. And then Dave came in, and Dave went to Liberty, and they were living up in Liberty. And their cousin, Kevin Riemann, was also he was in a Wardsboro trooper at the time. So watching those guys and seeing what they were doing versus what I was doing, it didn't make me want to jump, but it was a cool job. Like, I would ride a bus to a subway and sit in an office all day. These guys were out on the road, getting into all kinds of different things. So it was fascinating to me, but it led me to take the entrance exam while I was at Dow Jones. The test came up for the troopers. I went up to somewhere up in Orange County at high school. That's when you'd fill a high school at the entrance exam, right? Like, every room's filled.
Yep.
Took the test. I didn't score really high. I think I was like 4,000 on that test. Didn't think I would ever get called. And then 9/11 happened. And my office, when I was at Dow Jones, at the end of the room, at the end of the building, there were giant windows. And if you stood at those windows, looking down, you were looking into the Hudson River, and across were the Twin Towers. So every day that I went to work, I rode the PATH train. I'd get off at Exchange Place. That train would go one more stop to the World Trade Center. So I rode to work every day with people that were going over to Lower Manhattan. I'd come up in the morning, or there's the Twin Towers. When I was going home at night, the last thing I saw were the Twin Towers. Then 9/11, I still remember the day. I was working in the afternoon that day, so I went out for a run that morning where I lived in New Jersey, and it was a beautiful day. I mean, it was one of the nicest days. It was blue. It was like 70 degrees, just a beautiful day. And, got home, turned the radio on, and everybody's talking about a plane that had hit the World Trade Center. And I'm like looking like out the window, like, how could you fly into the World Trade Center today? Like, you know,
Right.
what idiot flew a plane? And I'm thinking it was a Cessna, right? Like, didn't have the reality that of what had actually happened. And then, you know, the second plane hit, and then the Pentagon, and then Shanksville, and it was scary. It was being that close to it. It was just, it was life altering, you know, like it really shook you to the core that, you know, that many people died, that those buildings came down. When I remember sitting and watching the first building come down, I'm like, your jaw was just on the floor. It's like, how could this happen? You know, I mean, those monster buildings. Um, but, you know, living in the shadow of ground zero after that, you know, my office closed for like a week because the flooding came back into the subway tunnel and they didn't know what was going on at the building. But by the time we got back into the building, just riding that PATH train into Jersey City and looking at this gaping hole in the bottom of Manhattan, and then having to get off earlier because that subway stop was now closed. So you had to get off at Grove Street and walk about a mile into the office. And just the stench of ground zero and the looking into that black, smoky mess that was down there. And, you know, thinking about all the people that you'd ridden the train with that probably weren't here anymore, you know, it changed. It really, really changed how I viewed my career, how I viewed life in general. You know, I always thought I would go on in that journalism track, but it that 9/11 was just a pivotal experience. And 1 month after 9/11, it was October 11th. One of the Flanagan brothers called me and said, I was working in the newsroom. He said, "You want to come over and tour Ground Zero?" I said, "Absolutely." So my bosses said, "Go write a story about it. Go over there and document what you see." So went over, went down to Ground Zero, full access to it. I mean, it was incredible. You know, the mounds of rubble that were still burning 1 month later, these giant excavators that were next to the rubble that looked like Matchbox toys. You know, I mean, that's how it just completely different view of lower Manhattan. We went into a fire station down there. I don't know how many of those guys died that day. It was the one right next to the World Trade Center, but log book with people leaving memorials. Next to it was a diner that it's the closest thing I'll ever see to Pompeii. You know, it was like that diner was just stuck in time from 9/11. There's still coffee pots on the burners, but just this coating of dust all over everything. But the really life altering part of that was leaving Ground Zero, and there were fences around it where, you know, everybody, the crime scene aspect of it. And those fences had thousands of missing posters on them because people were still hoping that their relatives were going to come home. And, you know, leaving Ground Zero and then walking by all those posters and looking at all those faces and realizing who had died and who wasn't coming home. One of my classmates from Rochester was working at Cantor Fitzgerald, and he died. You know, I got that call about a week after the attacks. I remember my mother called me at work, and you know, his name was Brandon Buchanan, great kid. But you know, that really hit home too because now there was a personal connection. So you know, it's a long-winded answer, but that's what drove me into public service, like that change in New York, that just the change in the world, you know. And I was like, you know, every time I hit this red button and publish a headline, I'm making some rich person richer, right? Like I'm making a trader's job easier. There's got to be more to this. And looking at what those guys up in F were doing and the impact they were making daily, and then what they were doing in New York after 9/11, I was like, I want to do that. You know, that's what I think that would be really cool. And on 9/11 of '02, I got sworn in with the 187th into the New York State Police. And I remember that morning we were in the lecture hall. You know how they keep you there a couple of days and they don't swear you in until like they've run all the riffraff out. And
Yeah.
so we're sitting there, but you know, I think Kirk Lee was the sergeant at the time, and you know, they did the memorial. You know, we're sitting in there, and they're hit at 8:47 or whatever time that first plane hit. They did a dedication, and we got sworn in that atmosphere. Very powerful. You know, it's always, you see behind me, I still have that picture of the FDNY raising the flag over 9/11.
Yeah.
It's just a powerful, powerful testament, I think, to New York, and that's what I wanted to be part of.
Yeah, I will tell you, unless a lot of viewers understand exactly what you're talking about, but there's also plenty that don't. I was the first wave that went down to 9/11. So when you referenced the stench and the atmospheric just change, like everything was changed. It was like you were living in like Gotham City. It was so weird the way New York City was at that time, and then to be anywhere near ground zero was just, you nailed it. It's life altering. It's one of those things you'll never forget. The smells, the sights, the people. So I can understand that 100% without a shadow of a doubt. So after you get sworn in, so your party said 187 class.
Yeah, 187th.
So I typically ask this when we go through the trajectory like this. During your academy experience, if you had to identify, let's just say this, what was your most challenging part of the academy? And then I'm going to flip it and say, what did you find to be the most difficult? So no, most challenging, and then let's just say the easiest, if that's a possibility.
You know, I guess the most challenging was playing the game, right? Like,
Yeah.
I came out of the corporate world. I'd been an adult for a long time, not a long time, but 3 or 4 years. At that point, Jay, I hadn't lived at home since I left high school, right? So I went through college. I'd done all these things. During college, I worked on commercial fishing boats in Maine. So I had a lot of adventures and a lot of freedom to do what I wanted to do. And then going into that very regimented environment where you go in there Sunday night and you play the game till Friday night. It was trying. I was 27 years old at the time, so it wasn't overly difficult, but it just got tiring after a while. You know, like, come on, guys, square in your corners, and they're dressing. Luckily, we had some real heat shields in our academy that, like, if you could time it right, and I would watch this one guy that he ultimately got run out, but I would try to leave the cafeteria with him. I'd watch him when he left. I would be behind him going down because I knew they were going to grab him, and I would just sneak right by, But that kind of stuff got challenging. Did you also ask what was the easiest thing about the academy?
Yeah, or what easiest, or what did you excel the most at? What did you find the most interesting? Any way you want to categorize it?
I not having any experience with criminal justice at that time, never even taking a criminal justice class, I found it really fascinating to learn about the laws, right? Like the vehicle and traffic law, the penal law, just the way that the police search and seizure, all the things that we take for granted now, but I had no point of reference on when I came into the academy. And being able to learn how to think like a cop and to work like a cop and to be a good cop, right? To be an ethical cop that follows the rules and does it the right way. I like that. And we had some, at that time, we still had some real road dogs as counselors, right? Like some of these guys were really experienced, and it was fun to learn from them too. We had very few counselors that had like 4 years on. A lot of these guys had 20 years, 25 years on. So it was great to learn from them. Jim LaPlante was an example. He was up at the academy forever. I worked with him in Oniana, but he listening to his viewpoint and even when I was on the road with him in Oniana, like, hey, why don't we do it this way? It was fun to learn and to have that guidance, which I think the job's lacking now. I think it's a huge problem on the job that you don't have these old timers that say, hey, kid, reel it in. how about this? And you're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. That's a much better way.
Yes.
But my first experience with that was in the academy. And I loved the training. You're shooting guns, right? You're driving cars at the airport and doing all kinds of crazy. We were going to Schenectady at the time, but EVOC was fun. Even the role-based scenarios that we did, I thought were really interesting because I had no experience with them. So it was all new to me and it was fun to learn that stuff.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I love how you categorize the most challenging playing the game, and that's pretty much that's the way you had to view it while you're going through it. If you can lock in your head that all this is a game, and then once you learn that game, just stay within the boundaries, then you're golden. I remember doing the same thing, having your shit shield, as you might call it, that one guy that is getting it every single time. Stay around him, don't talk to him or her, and it's coming. So that's one way to play the game. I think that's hilarious.
I remember that guy. We were doing a room change, and he went into a room just to. They were harassing him so bad on the room changes, he just ducked into somebody's room, and all the guys ran over and looked at the door, and they're like, "You're not in here!" And they're throwing his stuff in the hallway because they didn't want the counselors to come in and go after them because he was in there. But yeah, it was a game. Just a big game.
Yeah. Once you graduate from the academy, where do you end up going for FTO?
I came back to Rochester, and my primary FTO was in Geneseo, which is just south of Rochester. His name was Mark Miller, another road dog. He had a lot of time on when I worked with him. Really, really good amount of common sense. I learned a lot from him, and that whole station was a lot of really senior guys at that point. So. It wasn't very busy. They called it Happy Valley down there because the sheriff's department, there weren't that many people down there, and the sheriff's department was strong too. But getting a chance to ride with Mark, he really set me up for success later in my career. My secondary FTO was in Rochester, so I came up, and Rochester's at that time it was called the GRIP, the Greater Rochester Interstate Patrol, and that's all we did. We rode the interstate. Wrote a lot of tickets, arrested a couple drunks, but not a lot of calls. Between the two stations, I think I might have handled 2 criminal complaints in Geneseo and, tickets and a DWI in Rochester, but not a lot of what would come when I got to my first station.
Where'd you go then?
I went to Oniana. So I remember I was riding with Jack Slade was my secondary FTO. And somebody called him and said, "Hey, tell your recruit he's going to Oniana." I didn't even know where Oniana was. I had to actually get out a map and look and see it. I'm like, oh, okay. So, but I went out to Oniana, and Oniana was the exact opposite. Like, I wish I'd done my training in Oniana because it was. I remember my first Sunday there was Father's Day, and I had 12 complaints, right? Like 12 radio complaints the whole day. The last one was like 5 in the evening, 6 in the evening, and it was the local pizzeria guy in this little town north of Oniana was having a christening for his baby. And the neighbor's dog comes over and bites one of his guests. And this guy's right from Italy, right? Like a lot of the pizzeria owners that we've dealt with over our career. He came right here, set up his pizzeria. So the dog comes over, bites the kid. He goes in the house, gets a pistol, and starts shooting at the dog, and he's missing the dog, but putting rounds through the neighbor's house, and the neighbor's in the house watching TV, and all of a sudden she's got rounds whizzing by her. I remember I was standing there, and I didn't even know to call a BCI guy. Like the next senior guy who maybe had 6 months on me shows up, and he's like, we got to call TR Ward, we got to do this, do that. And I'm standing there my head's just spinning. I'm like, what did I get myself into? This isn't what we did back in Troop E. But the days definitely went faster in Oniana when you're just running from. At that time, there's 2 people covering 1,000 square miles, right? Like one of you took west, one of you took east, and you went out and you did the job. And it was a real introduction, I think, to police work.
that there's no other way to do it than just go in head first, right?
Yeah, it was
um,
crazy.
how long did you end up staying at Oniana?
I was there for 2.5 years. So I got there and I didn't have roots in New York at the time, right? Because I'd lived in New Jersey. So I decided I'm just going to stay here. I liked it. I liked the people I was working with. And, I enjoyed the work. I was learning a lot. And they were giving us a lot of opportunities. If you wanted to go try out for dive school, if you were working, they would send you. I got involved with crime scene tech work at that time. So a lot of work with FIU. We had some huge cases out there that were really interesting to work on. One was a farmer named Herman Arbus. He was in a town called Lawrence, and he just disappeared one day. And his kid shows up like at the bank with baby powder in his hair, trying to look older, trying to take the Herman's money out of the bank. And it turned into a huge missing persons case. And so we ended up seizing the farm, and I was helping FIU do a lot of the work up there, processing the farm. I think the ultimate theory was that maybe the father had ended up in the pig pit, right, and that his body just disappeared.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened with that case, but doing the FIU work up there, and then one night, Brian Bernard and I were sitting on the house because pulling security overnight. And I remember Brian left at like 6, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden here comes the kid that owned the house, and he drives up and like barges into the house. I'm trying to stop him, and I'm next to him calling for help. Like, I need somebody else up here. This guy's back. And he ran into the house and got a checkbook and some other documents, and he's trying to take them, right? And I stopped him, detained him, and we ultimately figured out that what he'd done, in addition to this case we were looking at him for, he kidnapped a Navy pilot that had been dating his wife down in Virginia Beach. And these documents that he had were the guy's checkbook, some other stuff that he brought back from Virginia with him. And so I ended up having to go down to Virginia Beach later on and testify in a hearing down there related to the second big case. But that was the kind of stuff, like, Oniana was fun because you would go on a call that you would think like, oh, it's nothing. And all of a sudden it turned into this huge thing.
Yeah.
So I stayed there. I liked the work. I liked being there, and I met my wife. So when we started dating, we were living there as well.
After Oniana, do you how does your trajectory of your career go in regards to, you obviously retire as a captain, so at what point do you make sergeant? And after speaking with you, you do a little bit of traveling after you make sergeant, so at what point do you make the sergeant position?
Well, so after Oniana, I transferred back to Troop E, and I was a trooper out in Wolcott, which is like kind of where Troop D and E meet on Lake Ontario. Another fascinating place to work. Just, we were the only show in town, really, and it was a lot of fun out there, a lot like Oniana. At that point, I then went down to Waterloo, which was another barracks in Troop E, and from Waterloo, I got into the master's program. So I actually went and did the master's program at SUNY Albany. The union put me through that. So I went to Albany, and that master's program was incredible at the time because they just, like, when you started the school year in August, division lost complete track of you. No one had any idea where you were, what you were doing. There was a lieutenant that was in the master's that was in charge of it. But you went to school and it was intense, right? Like, you did in 8 months what a lot of people do in 2 years, but you had a lot of freedom. So over that winter break, when I came back from the master's program, my wife was in nursing school at the time. We didn't have kids. And I'm like, well, I'm going to study for the sergeant's test, right? Like, I had no idea I knew I was eligible. I didn't really know what that entailed. Studied, and I had so much free time that I did really well on the sergeant's test. And my whole career changed at that point because, I kind of took it on a whim. Like I was always planning to go back on the road after the master's program. And all of a sudden I remember the major called me one day and no one prepped me for that. Like I didn't know what it entailed. I knew I was on this list and he called me and he goes, "Hey Rich, congratulations. Your time's up for sergeant. The openings are K and L." And I'm like, K and L. I go, "What's that mean?" He goes, "Well, you got either take K or L." He goes, "I recommend you take K. It's closer to home." I'm like, "Mage, I don't want to go to either of those places." And he's like, "Well, you can defer." And I said, "Okay, I'll defer." Like I really had very little interest. I didn't know what it meant. And so um, eventually it came around. I think I did that 2 or 3 times. And eventually they're like, "Listen, you got to take it, just take it, get into that field." And I got stationed. I took it and I went down to Troop F as a line sergeant in Monroe. So that was my introduction to being a sergeant in the state police.
Yeah, in Monroe. That's where actually I did my right after my FTO. That was the first station I went to. So what year was it that you went down to Monroe at your first station as a sergeant?
That was 2007, I think.
Okay.
It was about, yeah, it was like right around 5 years after I came on the job. So
Yep.
it was really quick. Looking back, I wish I had done more trooper time. I think trooper was the most fun on this job. Once you go into those supervisory ranks, the job changes. It's not trooper. Yeah, you see the shirt behind me. When a retired trooper made it for me, he goes, "You want your captain's rank on the collar?" I go, "No, put the E collar ornament and the New York collar ornament," because that's the most fun I ever had on this job was going out and being a trooper. So
One of the most common things I've heard, you're technically my 44th guest, and almost anybody that has gone up through the ranks, bar none, has said almost the identical phrase is that the best part of their career has been in the uniform as a road trooper, because that's where you learn everything. That's where you kind of have, I guess, the most freedom, but that's also where you learn the job, right? It's just interesting that you said that once again. I'm interested to hear your perspective on like your Wolcott, your Oniana, and then to your supervisory role in Monroe, how you gauge them as far as like busyness and the not I don't want to say importance, but the the weight of the calls that you encountered in comparison.
Oniana and Wolcott were very similar in that we had some really serious crimes that we got involved with. I mentioned that Arbus case. The other big one that sticks with me from Oniana was, again, I was doing the crime scene tech work, and right up the street from where I lived, in a town called Morris, New York, this we had an infant death, right, one day, and it was this father, and this I don't know if they were married. This couple, the woman worked in a nursing home, the father stayed home and shot heroin, right? So he's home shooting heroin, and he's got this 18-month-old baby, who 18-month-old babies are work, right? Like they aren't going to sit there and let you zone out as you're high on heroin. And the kid would fuss, and the father kept yanking his leg, yanking his leg, yanking his leg. And eventually he snapped the kid's femur. And so now the kid was really, really fussy, right? Like now he's in horrible pain. So this father, allegedly, I don't know how this whole ended. I don't think he was convicted of what we charged him with, but put morphine in the baby bottle, right, to quiet the kid down. And this kid sucked down the morphine and he died. And so, it's funny how certain calls stick with you and certain calls don't. Like that call sticks with me. It's one I can still picture the room. I can still smell the room, but the gravity of that situation, and this poor mother who's up at the nursing home working and doing what you're supposed to do, and to come home and their baby's dead because of that, it's just
Yeah.
stupidity. Wolcott was very similar. Like Wolcott, I always joked around that Wolcott, you could get dispatched to an EID and it would turn into a generational sex abuse case. Like it was just, it was ridiculous. And I remember we had a couple cases up there. One was a legitimate, stranger rape at Fairhaven, New York. That just scary. Really, really scary. What people are capable of doing to one another. But I remember that the girl came in to report that, and you're always skeptical, right? Like, is this really what you're saying it is? And it was exactly what she said it was. This guy just did horrible things to her. And so those two, and we have a very similar case in Oniana too, a very similar case where we got dispatched to a house where a woman said she pulled into her driveway, and a guy came out of the woods and raped her. And you're just like, this doesn't, you don't want to believe it happens, right? Like, you want to think it's something else. And as we did that investigation that night, I was working with an investigator named Jeff Moore, who was just like a pit bull, man. Like we went out and we did neighborhood interviews, and well into the night, where we're banging on doors at 10 at night doing interviews. Eventually located, everybody kept saying there was a car parked down this dirt road that didn't belong there. And we start walking down there, and sure enough, you find these footprints that came out of the woods, and you could see by the pace that the guy was running. And then the pace slowed down. He's walking, and we're walking backwards and almost step on the condom that the woman said he put on when he attempted to rape her. And, that guy I think he went away for 15 years. He was a predicate sexual felon. But, those two stations were very similar in that you would get into some real casework, and really could, it wasn't like writing tickets. It wasn't just going out like we did in Rochester. Not that that's not important, but it was much more police work oriented. In Monroe, we had very similar. What amazed me down in F was just the amount of call volume, right? Like, it was busy. It's the only place I've worked where they had 2 A-line sergeants. It was just the pace down there, and then the traffic, and we had some really good troopers there. I remember one trooper down in Monroe stopped the car. The guy had like $2,500 on him. Was going to the city, and this trooper sat out in the U-turn, and the guy had a loud exhaust, right? So he cuts the guy loose. That trooper sat out in the U-turn on 17 and waited for hours. And sure enough, here comes that car back from the city. He's got the PC of the loud exhaust, pulls him over, major heroin bust. It was really cool to see a different side. Not that the state's different, but to see how it worked in F versus how it worked in E, and the different variety of cases that you got into. I think it was a great introduction all around to the job.
So how long did you end up staying in Monroe, and then how does your career progress from there?
When I was in Monroe, I was there. I got hung up there as part of that hiring freeze. But when I was there, I actually had a hardship transfer home. My wife, I don't think she'd mind me sharing this. My wife had a number of miscarriages when I got stationed down in Monroe, and had to go under a specialist care for pregnancy. So my oldest daughter, Lily, when my wife was pregnant with her, I actually got home. So I came back to Rochester during that pregnancy. And then sure enough, 3 months after the pregnancy, I got the letter from, I forget the first deputy superintendent, your hardship's over. So I went back down to Monroe, and then worked my way back to Rochester through Troop C. I went to Owego. Kevin Molinari had been my captain in Oniana when I was a trooper there. He was now the troop commander. He put me in Owego. I was a sergeant there for like 6 months, which was cool. Really good people there, really strong group of troopers. And then Mike Lynch was the Troop C emergency management sergeant at the time, and he died suddenly, very young. I think he's like 44 years old, died of skin cancer. So Molinari sent me back to Oniana. and I was there until I got back to Troop B. But that was interesting too, because going into Oniana as a trooper and seeing it from that side, and then going back as a sergeant and seeing it from the other side was interesting in how the your perspective changes on certain things.
Yeah. So when you get back there, and how much time do you have on now once you're back up? Did you said Owego? How long
When
is
I was
that?
in Owego, it must have been '09. So yeah, about 7 years on at that time. I'm up there
Okay.
as a sergeant. And then Oniata, I remember I came back to Geneseo. I came back into Troop B as a station commander at Geneseo. I think it was like '09 or 2010 when I ended up there, which was weird because I was a very young sergeant supervising very old, very, very old troopers. So, including my FTO, Mark Miller, who was there when I was a sergeant.
I might have asked a previous guest the same question. I don't recall, but for some reason, I'm recalling a similar instance. What's it like? Since you said it, so what's it like being a relatively young supervisor in charge of senior guys that are relatively, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 to 10 years older than you? What's that feel like? Like, do you feel weird?
Yeah, it does, because you know, you have to be in charge, but how you're in charge, you know, if I went in there now with what I have, life experience and perspective, I would have done it a lot differently than how I did it at that point. I think when you're that young, I think you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know. The biggest thing I learned as a supervisor in the state police is that you got to get out of people what you can get out of them, right? Like some people are really good at certain things, some people are really good at other things. Knowing how to support them, right? That's how I viewed my role at the end of my career. Is I was a support function, right? Like I was supporting the troopers that worked for me, the investigators that worked for me. Not that I was in charge of them, but that I was a support function for them. When you're a young sergeant, you make the mistake of thinking I'm in charge, right? Like I'm the, and you're not. Like you're still that support function. And I wish I'd had that perspective and that realism when I went into it. But I think the problem with being promoted in the New York State Police is like there's no officer candidate school you go to like you do in the military, right? Like you take
Yeah.
a test and you select to be promoted, right? Like you choose to take the test. You might be ready for it, you might not, but division says you need this much time and whatever, and you take the test and you get promoted. And then it's really baptism by fire, right? Like if you have some good mentors, you'll do well. But sometimes like Geneseo, I was the only sergeant there. So it becomes a little bit more difficult in learning how to get along and to get things done and to trust your people, right? Like I think at that, when you're a young supervisor, that the idea that you need to trust the senior people, it's a little bit more foreign to you than it is later in your career when you realize, all right, these are my go-to people. This is what I need to do.
Yeah, and that's another thing that previous guests have said that had leadership roles is that there is no, I don't want to say course, but there's no development of those supervisors. And quite honestly, there should be like almost like an FTO phase where you go through and you kind of like learn different people's or different sergeants' perspectives on how to get things done. And I know you really don't have time for that in this job, but they also throwing you out to the wolves is rather dangerous, being a super young supervisor with super senior station, it could be
Yeah.
potentially catastrophic.
Yeah. And that's where I think like, working, I don't know the answer. There's no good answer to it because we just don't have the manpower to
Right.
devote to it. But yeah, to have a good mentor is gold on this job. If you can learn from somebody and decide to take the test later in your career when you have that good foundation, I don't know why divisions deems 5 years is the point that you can take the sergeant's exam, but maybe some people are ready for it. I don't think I was. I think I could have done a lot more time on the road, enjoyed that aspect of my career, probably left with a better perception of the job when I retired if I'd done that, you know?
Yeah. So walk me through, because at some point, you make captain, and I don't know if I would say our thought processes are the same, because I did a little over 21 years myself, but I kind of got to the point towards the end of my career where I think I had a similar perspective of not only the job in general, but in the atmosphere that we're in, and also, of the animal that is division, and how they come down and make decisions which you just can't wrap your hands around. So how does that how does that look for you? How do you get to that point? Was it when you're captain? Is that when it happens?
No, when when I came on the job, I was 27. At that point, you had to leave when you were 57. And I remember being sad that I could only do 30 years, right? I
Yep.
was like, oh man, that's
Yep.
all. And as I went through my career, the first time that I really started to look at the job differently was the Ralph Phillips manhunt. I don't know if you remember that or not. It was a
I do.
big thing in A Troop.
Yep.
But going through the Phillips manhunt, and I was out there for 4 weeks total. I went out on four times. When the night Sean Brown got shot, I was assigned to Troop E FIU for crime scene tech training. So I was on scene with FIU that night, like 2 hours after it happened. I remember I was processing the troop car. The troop car got hit in that. The car they were driving actually took a round, and I was processing it at the hospital with another trooper. And I remember Wayne Bennett came walking out because he'd been in to see Sean at the hospital. But then going out to the manhunt, and the first week that I was on that manhunt, I don't think there was a law enforcement asset that wasn't in Western New York. I remember just, FBI had a drone flying at 10,000 feet. Everywhere you went, you were bumping into some other agency. It was huge. I mean, it's just the amount of manpower out there was ridiculous. And as it went on, those agencies started to fall off. I think, our leadership kind of alienated some of them, turned away some help, made some decisions that I think were really mind-boggling. And then when Joe Longobardo and Don Baker got shot, it really, for me, it kind of changed my whole perspective. Like, this is so stupid. Like, why, Joe Longobardo, like 2-year-old, I think his son was 2 years old at the time. What they were doing at the time, and this one person's ability to wreak havoc on so many families and so many, just what happened on that really kind of made me look at the job differently. Like, maybe, it's not this infallible entity that I thought I was joining, and at the end, after Joe got shot, I remember last time we were out there, it was all those agencies were back, everybody was out there, and we ended up catching him at the end. But that was really when my perspective on the job kind of started to change. Like, I think that to have two people get shot like that, one critically injured, one line of duty death, and you're standing back like, for what? For what was this all about? Why did this need to happen?
Right.
That definitely stuck with me. But what was your original question? I got wandering there a little bit.
Just I forget where we were going with that one, and I do apologize myself because I got into it. Your perspective on the job, how it changed as far as division, and at what point, at one point you make a captain, right? So at what point do you see that change in division, and do you say to yourself, like, all right, I kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel here with the way things are going? Because my initial statement was, a lot of times it seems from an outsider's perspective with no supervisor experience, just a road guy my whole career, but I did different specialty units, but it just seems, to your point, that many decisions that are made, and you're not the first one that talked about some of these cases that have been mentioned in the last little dissertation there, that division makes poor decisions, not only in how they handle other entities, other agencies, but on how they handle us. I say us, obviously we're retired, but their membership, let's just say their membership and what they do to them, how they reprimand them and make examples of them. So at what point do you realize, you mentioned that you were kind of disillusioned with division in New York State as a whole. So you said that's when that happens. What kind of pushes you towards like, all right, I'm I'm good to go here? Because originally you said 30 years is
Yeah.
where I was going, because that was the same for me. I was going to do at least 25 years. I came on at 25. I wanted to do 25, retire at 50. And once I hit like 19 years, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to see what I can do here to get my 3 best years. I'm out because, you got the body cameras started. You had the George Floyd incident. And once the George Floyd incident hit, whatever your opinion is of that, that's where I saw a gigantic shift in society and the shift on how people in general viewed policing.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I think like the Ralph Phillips manhunt was my first look that division didn't necessarily have all of our interest at heart, right? Like some of the stuff that went on there was just so stupid, like you know, and unnecessary, and the way that we were treated when we were out there. Not that it was bad, but it was like, you know, the support for the troops wasn't there, so that changed my perspective originally. But then the job changed, right? Like you were on before me, and I think you can testify to this too, that like '02 to '10 to 10, you could go out and have a lot of fun on the job, right? Like you could go out and you could be proactive. You could make a difference. You could find your niche and really, do what you wanted to do. Not that you could do what you wanted to do, but you could go out and develop yourself in a way that you wanted to be on the job, right? As I got into the supervisory ranks and started to see the change in, for example, when I was a trooper in C Troop, I never saw a captain on a scene. I think I saw a captain on a scene once, and it was that homicide case I talked about. But you were out there doing the job. The sergeants would come out and help if you needed, but you weren't micromanaged the way that I watched the job change into over time, right? Like, and I think you see that when you become a supervisor, and all of a sudden it wasn't, you called the captain and the captain stopped it and it was his zone, and the decision was his. These decisions were always going up the chain, up the chain, up the chain, and then things would come back down that didn't make sense, and you're like, for me, that's really what changed my perspective on, do I want to move up into the ranks, right? Like I made lieutenant. I went to Rochester for 3 years. I was the station commander in Rochester. And while I was there, I went back to school and got my MBA on a part-time basis at the U of R. So just because I had that perspective that I probably don't want to do 30 years, right? Like I want to set myself up at 20 where I can do something else. But then I made lieutenant and I went to Jamestown out in A Troop, and, seeing how a zone commander really operates, right? Like it's his zone, but there's all this pressure. You get a lot of pressure from below and then a lot of pressure from above. And the above pressure would win a lot, right? Like what came down from field command is ultimately what was going to do it. And I don't know what changed it. I don't know if it was like the ability of field command to see social media, to better monitor what was going on. They weren't so dependent on people getting calls or calling up and reporting stuff. I think they could see through these social media sites, these news alert sites, a lot of stuff that was going on. And, you would run around on stuff, investigating stuff that you would never pay attention to otherwise, right? Like when we were first troopers, it wasn't stuff that garnered attention. But now, like a school bus accident in a town that we don't even patrol, field command's calling, what's going on with this school bus? And I think they're getting pressure from the governor's office too, right? But it just made me not want to stay in that environment for 30 years. Like, I didn't want to be running around and reacting all the time. I wanted to do more get back into some other things that interested me, because the job, and like you said with George Floyd, we had the riots here in Rochester, right? Like we had a case in Rochester that was almost equal to George Floyd. It was Daniel Prude. He died in custody, but that story didn't break until George Floyd was out. For that story had been out for a while, but I remember when that story broke, all of a sudden here come these U-Haul trucks from Minnesota with these professional protesters, and we dealt with that I forget, it was weeks, but these protesters down here, they set a police car on fire across from the Rochester Police Department. They had the barricades and the arm locks, and shining lasers at cops, throwing water bottles, frozen water bottles at cops. It just really, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the job I joined. We weren't doing what we did when we were first on the job.
Yeah,
going out and making a difference.
absolutely. Yeah, same exact way. And I vaguely remember that incident, and I have so much more respect speaking to a few guests that were from the area up by where you are on what they had to deal with up there in Rochester. I know Troop F typically is one of the busier troops, but Rochester, the city itself, is probably one of the craziest, busiest cities in the state of New York by far. I know there's some other dangerous cities as well, but that's a bad area up there.
Yeah, it's a give city, so it tells you all you need to know about it.
Yeah, fair enough. So you make the decision to pull the trigger after being captain, and how much time do you have on, and where do you retire out of?
I retired. So when I was a captain, I ended up retiring out of PSB West. I went there for a short time, like I think it was 2.5 months right before I retired. Prior to that, I'd been the zone commander down in Zone 3, which was Steuben, Chemung, Yates, and Schuyler counties. So I was down there, and I had decided at that point that I'd had enough. I didn't want to be. The thing that really got me, Jay, was the expectation of commissioned officers that you're on call 24/7, right? Like if you're a zone commander, you're on call all the time, and and a lot of the things that we would get called in on, it was like, you're constantly putting your family second to go and do this. And for me, I was doing it for a zone, and then I looked at the major, and I'm like, he's doing it for 3 zones. Like, is that the next step up? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to run around for 1 zone, but I'm going to be responsible for 3 zones. So that changed my perspective. Really led me to, like I said, I got my MBA. I was ready to make the jump, and I started looking around and saying, what else can I do? What else is out there? And luckily, a public safety sales job came open, and I decided to pull the plug and move on to the next chapter of my life.
Yeah. So going back to your point on being on call as a commissioned officer, kind of 24/7, and having to go to some of these incidents or calls that are completely not necessary. And secondly, are calls that probably, to your point, back in the late 2000s up until 2010, let's just say for argument's sake, that if not a road trooper, but a line sergeant or station commander would typically be able to handle without any issues whatsoever. It's just like, I think to your point, as the job progressed, they want to put their thumb on everything and make sure that they're getting more eyes from a different perspective on these incidents.
Yeah, and I remember one time I was golfing, and we had a suicidal subject down in a very rural area. He'd driven into a middle of field. He was in a pickup truck. He had a shotgun. There was no one around. Like, there were 250 yards around this guy, and they had a drone on him. And there was 2 sergeants on scene. The sheriff's department had people there. The sergeants kept calling me, kept me apprised of what was going on. And I remember the major kept, "Are you going down there? Are you going down there? Are you going?" I'm like, why? What does my presence bring at that scene that, I can't trust? One of the sergeants came on with me. I mean, we had equal time on. I trusted his judgment. What was I going to gain by driving an hour and a half down to this scene? I didn't understand. And you were constantly, that was just one of many, right? Like
Yeah.
every week you were constantly just taken away from your family. I remember when my daughter, oldest daughter, wanted to start working out. And so I joined Planet Fitness. And one night we're walking into Planet Fitness and the phone rings. Um, and, sorry, honey, I got to take you home, right? Like take her
Yeah.
home. And then 45 minutes later, I'm on a scene. And it as your kids get older, as your perspective changes, you realize I'm not getting this time back. Like, I have one shot with the kids and to do things. And that's really what drove me into a second career is like, I've given a lot to this job. Um, it's time to do something else. Like, let's put family first and move into something as a second career.
I absolutely love that. So, as you were describing getting your MBA and moving on to this job that I cut you off on, what I noticed is that you made no mention of wanting to do anything else law enforcement related in regards to going back into police work. And I like that. Me personally, I don't, I, once I retired, I said, I don't, no, I respect the current law enforcement more so now than probably ever before, because I know I can't do it or couldn't do it, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But was it a similar thing? Like you just don't want to be part of law enforcement anymore? You just want to take the next step and see where you can go after?
Yeah, I did consider some law enforcement jobs like down south. I would have happily gone down south and been a police chief, but um, you know, my when I went back and got my MBA, my wife and I had run an in-home tutoring business on the side, and it was a real introduction to sales for me. And what I loved about sales is that it's competitive, right? Like if you're a competitive person and you want to do your best and put your all into something, sales is a great career field because what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So when I got to that, I always said I was going to go at 20. I ended up staying past that, but it took me that little bit of time past that to realize where I wanted to go. I think the problem that we have when we were so immersed in the state police culture is seeing ourselves as something other than a police officer, right? Like it's very hard. That shield is your life, right? Like you're always worried, where's my shield? It's always on you. It becomes who you are. And for me, it took a little bit of time to break that mold and say, you know what, that's not who you are. You can do other things. You can do related things, but I don't need to stay in police work. Not to say that that's not a noble cause. One of my classmates is the chief of police in Oswego now. Good for him. We need good people in roles like that. The commissioner of Orange County Public Safety is a retired state police captain. I applaud those people that can continue to do it and that are going to bring a good common sense approach and a good head to it and to continue to promote this noble profession that we were part of. For me, I was at the point where I needed to do something else. I knew that I wasn't going to be 100% into it. So finding something else to do. And luckily, like I said, I'd had this experience in sales. And I remember one day I just had this aha moment. I'm like, wait a minute, you like sales? There's got to be public safety sales. I'd never looked at it. I didn't know there was this field, but I started, on job searches, putting in law enforcement and sales. And I was shocked at what came up. There's this whole field out there of great jobs. And that's what ended up, as I got to the very end of my career, I got a job offer from a company called Provision, which does mobile video equipment, and they had body cameras. So they had a public safety wing. But they gave me a job offer and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go try it. Let's see what at this point. The other thing we don't think of is the pension gives us a great cushion, right? Like to go out and try new things. And for me, it was like, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to make much less now, retired for a couple of years, than I would if I was still working. So why not go try something? Well, I was in my late 40s at the time. Why not go try this? Let's see if it works. If it doesn't, I can get another job, you know. But it was exciting. It was really it was great for me because I got to go into a field where I could still hang out with cops, firemen, EMS, emergency management. But I didn't have to. At the end of the day, I went home and I wasn't getting rung 24/7. I wasn't getting the political pressure that they were getting. Um, you know, and the one thing that really drove me nuts at the end of my career was the AG's office influence on the job, right? Like the critical incidents that we would go to, and the AG's office, not demanding, but you know, the AG's office influence on those critical incidents, and you know, they were there within 2 hours. They wanted to see the body camera. And then you watched what happened to some of our members in critical incidents, including my classmate Baldner. You know what he went through, um, and even the guys and girls that got cleared. Right, like they didn't. The AG doesn't really clear them. Like it doesn't.
Right.
At the end of the day, the report doesn't say the trooper acted in accordance with his training and procedures that he was taught in the police academy. It's we found nothing to charge the trooper with. That really changed my perspective too. And like, what are we doing here? You know, like you train them this way, they act in accordance with their training. It should be crystal clear, right? Not that we didn't find something to charge them with. And then the people that do wrong, I'm all for it. You know, they need to be held accountable. But
absolutely,
the people. Can you imagine the pressure on some of these troopers that had good shoots? And I had a couple of them here in E. And 18 months of that weighing on you. I mean, it's gotta be physically taxing, mentally taxing to sit there and wait 18 months, sometimes longer. And then it's not, you did what you were trained to do. It's, we didn't find anything to charge you with. It's just very, very different job than what I joined.
It's a telling tale of the times that we're living in, unfortunately. And this is amazing. This is a perfect pivotal critical point where you start talking about, you know, what the title of this episode is, you know, how to prepare for life after the job. And it's very important to know for any troopers that might happen to listen to this episode that are towards the end of their career or towards their 20-year mark, to understand that not only do you not have to be in law enforcement? If you want to, then so be it, because we need good guys. But to understand, to your point, Rich, that there are so many opportunities, whether it's like I'm a self-hustle guy. Like I do dog training, dog boarding. I do photography. I'm taking pictures I'm actually started doing photography of the local stations down here. I do trailer rentals. I created my own side hustle because, similar to other people, I want to be my own boss. You know what I mean? I went so many years of being told you're working A-line, 1-5s, overnights. You're going to be coming down to New York City for a search warrant with your canine, and all those things I loved. But you know, I also want me time, and that's what you deserve. That you deserve to have the opportunity to have your me time. So as you translate how this all came to with your new job, because you've had a few different jobs now since you've retired. So let's talk about this first job that you get into and where you go from for there, because this is an important job that guys that are close, please listen, understand there's a lot of opportunity for you guys and girls out there.
Yeah, and you know, I applaud you, Jay. I think what you're doing is awesome, right? Like you're giving a voice to people, and you found your niche, and I found my niche. And I think the key to that is to start thinking about where you want to be before you hit that 20-year roadblock, right? Like to have the wherewithal to say, and maybe it's, you know, I might leave at 20, you know, see where I'm at, but to have a plan in place to where you want to go. I think a lot of people don't realize how marketable they are with the skills they develop as a trooper, right? Like I run into people, I do a lot of conventions, trade shows, and I run into a lot of ex-cops, and some of them were traffic guys that now are working with companies that that deal with traffic. I run into a lot of dog people. You know, that dog world is its own. I'm not even gonna pretend to understand it the way you do, but it's its own universe, right? Like there's a lot of opportunity there. Um, you know, the AI aspect of what's coming into law enforcement, there's a lot of opportunity there to work with companies to help them craft and develop how they want their products to work. You know, so for me, my transition was leaving the state police. I went to this body cam company. It was a good first move, but it was a difficult move because um, it was you don't realize the power of Axon until you get into the body cam space and realize how much of a monster company they are. And, you know, we were like a little chihuahua going up against one of the biggest dog breed. I don't even know what they are, but whatever the biggest dog breed is, like trying to just get in there and get a little nugget of the market share that was out there. And Axon is an incredible company. You know, what they've done with their cameras and what they're capable of now, it's really incredible. We weren't keeping pace. So I did that for like 14 months, went out, worked with a lot of not only body cams, but putting cameras on police cars, fire trucks. It's amazing to me how many departments don't have video in today's age. But that was my first foray into public safety sales. And it really opened my eyes to what's out there in terms of where you can go in that field. At about 14 months into that job, I had an opportunity to go to another company called Tyler Technologies, which is a company it's not a common name, but they're very powerful in the public safety space and in the government space. So they do government software. I ended up in a segment of that company that sold accounting software to town supervisors, village clerks. It was very different than what I was used to. You know, I went from going in and having coffee with the cops and talking cameras to now I'm trying to get in front of a village clerk or a town supervisor and convince them that the software they've used for 20 years, that they should switch and go with a new software. And it was not what you were used to with what I was used to with cops and firefighters. It was a very different look at sales. And I'd be first to admit, I was a round peg in a square hole. Like, I'm not the guy. I had no point of reference on what these people's jobs were like, what they did day to day. But it was a great introduction to software sales and how you can sell software and seeing how that market works. So I was there for about 9 months. I had New York and Pennsylvania as my territory. And this new opportunity with a company called Peregrine came up. So Peregrine is a really cool product in that in law enforcement, we have all these data silos, right? Like if you picture about what we'd access on a daily basis in the state police, you know, you've got when I was there, we had SJS. Now they have niche, I think, RMS. Your CAD, your tracks, your body worn camera, all the other systems that we would access on a day-to-day basis to do our job. None of them talk to each other. You couldn't search all of them at once. And then not only that, but you think about all the files that are sitting on some backroom investigator's desk, the information that's in those, they're all silos, right? Like you can't access them all. What Peregrine does is sits on top of all those silos and gives you a unified platform in which you can search your own data. And it's a very powerful tool because it allows you to bring to bear everything that's in your systems onto an investigation. So when I applied, I saw a job for Peregrine in New York and Western PA to be their law enforcement sales rep. And I applied, and the more I got to know about the product, the more excited I got about it and just its ability to transform how we do day-to-day operations. And when they offered me the job, I jumped at it, and it's been a fun ride. A lot of exciting developments. It's just opened my eyes to what's coming in law enforcement and how all these different technologies are going to transform what we did. And I'm sure you had the same experience as I did. The first day we blottered out on FTO, we were blottering out in the blotter, right? Like with a ballpoint pen, Reedy, and all those other terms that no one knew what they were. And now you look at what is capable in policing, and it blows my mind. I mean, it's only been 24 years, right? Like, but the lengths that we've come it's just incredible. So it's
Rich,
exciting. I think.
Just don't forget about the black pen being taped to the red pen so you could switch it over when you. Oh, come on. Every station had that. Yeah. So, yeah, and the ruler and the crusty old ruler that had it had so many chips in it. All you old timers know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm interested to know how this company, how do they pull all of this information to gap it into one platform that is searchable? Obviously, they have to have access to it from the agency itself, right?
Right.
So what does that look like? They just pull all this information together on one basic platform?
Yeah, and if do you use Claude or Grok or ChatGPT, those kind of platforms? So if you're familiar with those, Peregrine's very similar, right? Like Peregrine, the search feature on Peregrine is incredible. Like, it was developed. So the founders of Peregrine were two Stanford engineers. Their names are Nick and Ben. They're still the founders of the company, still there. But when they graduated, they got into the tech space and worked in the tech space. And then they came back together and said, let's find a data problem that we could solve. And they ended up embedding with the San Pablo Police Department in the Bay Area of San Francisco. And the chief, they went and said, can we observe how you do things? And the chief had the foresight to say, sure. He background checked them, ran them through a poly, and then he let them sit with his homicide division for 8 months. And as they watched the homicide division work, they're like, why do you guys have to log into all these separate systems? Why is so much information sitting in a file? You think of our DIRs, Jay, like how much info is on a DIR, never to be seen again, sits in a file in a cabinet, and at 5 years it gets shredded.
Yep.
But, that was the genesis of Peregrine. And how it works is that when a police department or a fire department decides to come on and be a Peregrine customer, we assign a engineer to their department, and the engineer sits down and asks them, how do you want these things to look? How do you want these things to interact? And then using APIs and bringing all that data into one usable platform. So, if you run through like a typical scenario of like, let's say you got the guy that's checking door handles in a neighborhood and just stealing stuff. And, the day shift comes in and you've got 27 cars that got hit in the neighborhood, and you develop a suspect, and somebody says, well, that suspect, his last name is Jones or whatever. When you type Jones into this platform, if you're a Peregrine customer, it's going to bring up everything with Jones on it. So it'll bring up all the people, it'll bring up all the cases, it'll bring up all the evidence, all the body-worn camera that has Jones attached to it. And, you might have 250 pieces of evidence that you can look at, but just on that one word. And you can further, let's say somebody said, well, he had a tattoo of a rose on his left arm. You can put tattoo rose and narrow it down. And within very short time, narrow it down to who that person is based on your data. So it's not like you're searching Google and you're searching the internet. You're just searching your data, and it's bringing it into a form that is just so usable and so easy to run down leads in that it's an incredibly powerful tool.
I have two questions for you. First, are they an only, and I don't know if I view this as a good or bad thing. It's just I came up with it. Are they only a law enforcement based AI company at this point?
No, stretching out into other areas as well. Fire, EMS, emergency management, and other forms of government as well.
Okay.
Anybody that has, I think in our day and age, you have so much data, right? Like we have any business, anybody has all this data, but how do you leverage the power of that data? And that's where the strength of Peregrine is. And then bringing it all into this unified platform and making it easy to search and to zero in on exactly what you need.
Yeah, it's very
So,
interesting as you talk about it, um, because as you're talking about it, I think, and I don't know if they've done this or if they have plans to do this, but what about interagency commingling of information? You know what I mean? So like you have an individual who commits a crime down here in Middletown, New York, right? So Middletown PD slams his name into the platform. And what if that same individual is either wanted or known for that same criminal activity up in Rochester, Syracuse area, wherever that may be? I'm interested to see if they have foresight to try to link interagencies within that platform.
yeah, they do. And, in California, the company started in California, so the California customers are more developed than as it's spread to the East Coast. So if you keep hearing me keep talking about California, that's why. But like California, San Pablo PD, you might type the word Jones in and get 250 returns, right? But San Pablo sits amongst a bunch of small cities, Richmond. I don't know them all, but there's a number of cities in that area that have all developed memorandums of understanding, and they share data. Most of it's CAD and RMS data. No one's sharing body worn camera. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
that
Yes.
that. But the CAD and RMS data, and like you said, criminals don't know jurisdiction, right? Like your
Yeah.
Middletown criminal might go up to Binghamton for a while, but the nature of our job was a lot of stuff ended at the county line, and God forbid it happened in the next troop, because that was like the Great Wall of China, right? Like, you
Exactly.
didn't know what was
Exactly.
going on there.
Yep.
But the power of this system is that you can interconnect and interlink, and we have some really regional connections, especially down in like Florida and Georgia, where it's even crossing state lines. And the power that that brings into an investigation is just, you can solve crime and you can develop leads so much more quickly when you have that whole universe of data versus just what we had on when I was doing the job, which was
Yeah.
SJS, which couldn't even search easily, right?
Yeah, but I'm trying to see well, take out of the element division itself, but I'm trying to see a world where they could pull all of, the state police's data and pull it into one platform, because there's tons and tons of information. They would have to go around to every station, substation, and try to pull that all together. Obviously, it would take a decent amount of time to do that.
Yeah, but it's not undoable, right? Like
Yeah.
right now we have 400 customers. LAPD, Dallas, Philadelphia just signed on. So you've got these huge departments that have that same issue. And it's not as difficult as you think. If you can connect those systems through the APIs that are out there, and then develop the other things that you need to do. One of the really powerful things that we do is OCR technology. So scanning in files and then making them part of the searchable database as well. So, one of my coworkers uses an example of the word bongo, and he'll put bongo into the search on his system that he uses, and it gets so granular that there's actually an impound report where somebody had bongos in the trunk of their car, and the officer had written bongo on what was that? It was General 21 or whatever we had, the impound and inventory report.
Yeah.
But we never had that info, right?
Yeah.
Like we had what was in SJS, and then you had to go talk to that old crusty investigator in the back room that knew everybody and start to develop your investigations that way.
Yeah.
If you think about it now with this technology, where if you're on your MBT or even your phone, and to have that whole universe of data available for any investigation,
Yep.
it becomes a very powerful tool. There's an example of a missing 2-year-old down in one of the southern states, a nonverbal autistic child that was found wandering a neighborhood, and no one in the neighborhood recognized who they were. No one knew who this child was. The child couldn't tell anything to the officers. They entered the child's description into the platform, just put a couple things in there, and they were able within a couple minutes to identify the child just based off an address and the parents' names that came off of a CPS report that was sitting somewhere within the police department's data. So you think about how long that case would have taken to find that child's parents. And with this platform, just being able to put in a couple things, they reunited that child right away with the parents.
Without a shadow of a doubt, I can see, even with the brief amount of information that you provided, I can see the value it provides in just simply streamlining countless types of investigations. Oh my God, I can't imagine if that many agencies are already signed on. I think it would be extremely beneficial to the state police, but I can see this going pretty nationwide at some point, that all these agencies are going to want to get on to that, because it's I mean, it's a no-brainer, and it saves you manpower, right? It saves you the manpower to kind of look into stuff too.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets even more powerful than that. Like I remember in Troop F, there were a lot more transient people when I was down there. You had a lot more pass-throughs. With our system, when you put a name in and you look at a person, it will actually, through the assistance of AI, create a person profile for you. So it will go through and pick out of the reports that you have on that person, paint a picture of who that person is, and give you a complete background. Your more frequent flyers, it can be a very detailed picture of who they are from the time they were in juvie till now, what they're doing now. But there's also the ability to look and see where people are. So you can type in, besides this park and Walgreens, where can I find this person? Just that prompt, like you would Claude or something else. And it will go through all of your data and come back and say, okay, you can also find them at this restaurant. You can find them at this store. These are all the places. Here's the most recent phone number. You think about how hard that was when we were on the job to go through SJS and to find that info was almost impossible. And now you have it within, 20, 30 seconds, a complete picture where the person might be. And it's what's sitting in your files already. It's what's sitting in your systems, but just not something that we had easy access to. So you can tell I get excited about it because I just think it's one of my coworkers and I joke that this is what we would have asked Santa Claus for if we could have asked Santa Claus for something for police work, because it just transforms how police work can be done.
Yeah, and quite frankly, Rich, for someone in your position where this is now your job, this is something that you can feel good about being passionate about, because you're doing good all around. There's really, I'm trying to think of what can be pulled out negatively with this technology, and I'm sure there could be some naysayers and certain aspects. But if you're in the job right now and you're looking for your job to be streamlined and not necessarily easier, but easier, to make your information more attainable, then obviously this is the route to probably go, for sure.
It really is, because I think it gives you back. There's two things that really excite me about it. One is the time that it gives you back, right? I remember as a lieutenant, you would get a lot of assignments of like, get me data on this, or build a report on that. And it would take you a week or two to really do a good job, Excel spreadsheets, get the data out of multiple sources, talk to everybody, and then present a report that at that point is already stale, right? Because it's not real-time data. I was on a demo with a coworker this morning who used to be a chief of police in California, and he typed in to the system, show me every intersection in the city where there's been an accident, the tickets that were issued, and any injuries that occurred. And within 30 seconds, he had all this data in a usable form that, here you go, here's what you need. You can hit a share button, send it to the chief, send it to whoever requests it, and move on with your day. So the ability to refocus on the other things that we need to do that a lot of these tedious tasks take up is really important. The other thing that's really exciting about this is the ability to better help officer wellness. I think what we've seen in policing, I think the typical city in New York, whether it's Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, Syracuse, I think they're all down 25% in terms of manpower. They can't get people to come onto the job. What you start to see is officers being mandated to work, to put in hours that we would volunteer for if we were big on overtime, but we didn't have to do it, right?
Right.
Now they have to do it to fill the ranks. And how do you monitor those officers and make sure that they're not getting burned out, that they're not being exposed to calls that are really having a toll on them? You know, when I was a captain, I did a horrible job at monitoring officer wellness. If we went to a big incident and EAP was there and it was something that everybody was out for, you wrote down everybody's names, you gave it to the EAP investigator, they followed up with it. I would never know if one of my officers was or troopers had been at an infant death, like at the beginning of the month, and then cut somebody down at a suicide a week later, and then had a family involved in a fatal a couple weeks later. We just never had that visibility. In the state police, you know, you would have somebody that went from writing 10 a day, now they're writing 2 a day. That would catch your attention. Hey, what's going on with Joe?
Yeah.
Oh, he's going through a divorce. His wife left him, this, that. But with this system, you can integrate the CAD and RMS data and really start to look and see how your officers are being impacted on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and when you should bring in peer support and other things that can really help on that front. You know, we're fortunate in New York. You know, there's a gentleman named Jim Banish who runs the New York Law Enforcement Assistance Program. His brother Joe was a trooper. He was, I think, when he committed suicide, he was a lieutenant. And Jim has taken it upon himself to honor Joe's legacy by working to get in place the structure that we need here to really promote officer wellness. And you know, I think it's so important that we start to look at what is impacting our officers on a day-to-day basis, how that affects them over the course of a career, and how we can better support people so that they don't run off the job because they're burned out or they get injured or you know, right now, the number of suicides in law enforcement outpaces the line of duty deaths. We need to get our arms around that. Yeah. And I think using data in a smart way to help our officers and to keep abreast of what's impacting them is so important. And I bring up Jim because Jim just had the Lieutenant Joe Banish Act passed by the New York State Legislature, signed by the governor, to really encourage peer support and that peer support be in place in a way that can help officers. And it's a good first step. I think we need to continue building on that momentum. And I'm excited to be part of that with this platform because it's a real way that we can do that.
Yeah, I agree. And he has been spoken about on more than one occasion. He's on my radar at some point to hopefully get on and speak with him in more detail about what his vision is and what he has done up until now. So thank you for bringing that up. And I didn't even think about that. Obviously, you just think about the criminal aspect of it, but now you can monitor, you know, your officers, troopers, whoever, sheriffs that have gone to calls and what they've experienced, and now categorize that and have somebody overlook that and be like, hey, you know, Joe Smith needs to be talked to here, pull him aside and have a moment with him and see how he's handling this, you know, or however you want to manage it. But it definitely puts it into attainable data that you can now look at. And also there's a lot of other things too. Rich, is also like the guys that you know, that are crying the game, and you look at what they're doing and really not doing much at all. So you can kind of call them out on that. You've had 3 accidents in the past 3 months. Stop complaining. Like, you're fine. Now, if it's something at home, so be it. But stop complaining about the job. There's so many different aspects of it, though.
And you know, I was talking to Jim, and we were talking about the fact that, and I would highly encourage you to have him on your show because he brings an incredible perspective to it. He was an officer himself out here in Western New York in a sheriff's department, but you know, he made the point, and I don't think he'd mind me paraphrasing him on this. We do a really good job in policing of documenting bad behavior by officers, right? Like, I think now if you have 5 personnel complaints, you're on some kind of watch list, or I'm not sure what goes on, but How well do we document what's impacted a trooper over the course of 25 years, right?
Yep.
Like, we don't. And if we could better document how a person's been impacted and the help that we can offer to them, and to show the impact of a career on a person, we can get rid of that 5 year statistic, right? That you only live 5 years past retirement, that all these things that in the past, I think, when we had this mentality, suck it up, move on, next call, to be able to take a holistic view of it is so much more important. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I would be too. Any final points you want to drive home here? I would say any aspect of the podcast that you want to reiterate or drive home, but I'm kind of speaking more to, I think, which is one of the more important points. I mean, the newer guys, so be it, but like the guys that are getting close to retirement that are thinking about what their options are, the fact that there are so many opportunities out there for law enforcement in general, if they keep their minds open, I think is an important thing for them to understand, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that if you're approaching retirement, even if you're not sure you want to go, start thinking about what excites you. Start thinking about what wouldn't feel like work to you if you wanted to do it, and and stop fearing change. Right? Like, I think that's the biggest impediment we put on ourselves is the fear of change, and it is scary, right? Like, when I stepped off and left the state police, that's been your identity for 2 decades at least. But if you can realize the good fortune that this career brings in the term of a pension, in the terms of the skills that you've developed over the course of your career, and channel those things into things that you are still passionate about. And with us, we're all young when we retire. We're not in an age where we can't go and do things. If you have any desire to do that, act on it. Start thinking about it. I always tell people, call me if you want to brainstorm ideas. I'm happy to help anybody that wants to think about the next step. But it's just so important, I think, to take advantage. We're not here that long, Jay. You think about
Yeah.
it, what, 80, 90 years. Maximize that. Don't think that I'm going to be a trooper and then that's it. If that's your goal, great, do it. We need good people on the job. But if you want to try something else, take advantage of what we're offered and go out and find what you're passionate about and have that second act. And I haven't met anybody, have you, that's done the second act that regrets doing the second act?
Not one. Not a single one. I tell you, the best part of retirement is the last day of the month where that check comes in. There's no better feeling than getting paid that retirement check for your pension. So it's well worth it. Rich, thank you so much for your time and for your story. I appreciate everything that you provided to the listeners, and I'm interested to see where this new company is going to go. For the listeners, I appreciate all of you. Please, if you're listening on YouTube, please like and or comment and share all this so we can get out to as many listeners as possible. Same thing with any other platforms. But the more you guys interact with this, the more I can be seen, and these people that I have on can be seen, and the stories can be shared. So thank you. And thank you once more, Rich. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on. It was a great conversation.
Yes, sir. All right.